Thank you. So yeah, we're sticking with the drug substance theme. And if you can get AI into a presentation title, you're doing well. So we've got that in there, which is good. So I'm Sam Whitmarsh. I work at CatSci. I'll talk a bit about them in a minute. But I thought I'd pose the question for this talk. What if we could seamlessly capture and share R&D knowledge and insights with a manufacturing facility? So that is obviously the aim. We do that already, but there are clearly gaps in our ability to transfer information. I'm sure there'll be people here who have been on the receiving end of a tech transfer process. You think you've done everything. It comes to that time when you want to go live, and then a magic problem appears. And so I want to, talk about options that we've got around reducing, just in a way that Nick was speaking about it. What options do we have in reducing the risk that there is in that handover between scales? So story about technology transfer, how digital technologies can help build a better connection between R&D and manufacturing. So I'll talk a bit about CatSci, then a bit about drug development and that tech transfer process, how we scale up workflows. The bulk of the presentation will be talking about a collaboration we have with a startup in AI computer vision, and then conclude with data-led tech transfer. So who are CatSci? We are a scientifically led, commercially minded, and award-winning process innovation partner. So we work in these 6 areas at the moment. So the bulk of our work is in process development, so in synthetic chemistry and scale-up. We're just about to have a GMP analytical facility in London. So that is being set up at the moment. Non-GMP and GMP material supply, so this is drug substance. Material science and pre-formulation group was set up last year. And so we're growing in that space. Highly potent API research development, up to OB5, so that's 0.1 micrograms per cubic meter. And then in April, we just launched our oligonucleotide business unit. So doing method development and of oligonucleotide modalities. So in a talk about digital, it's worth remembering, I think, that when we're thinking about technology, when we're thinking about new ways of working, it's the people that make the difference. So these are the people who solve problems, and they're using those tools. And so just to shout out to all the collaborators in this presentation, and then everyone at CatSci for the great work that they do. I think it's been noted as we've gone through some of the talks already, that importance of people in the digital transformation agenda. Okay, so drug development. I won't labour this. I wasn't 100% sure what the audience would be, but I think everyone will be familiar with this. So everyone has a different picture of the drug development pipeline. I take the chunk in the second half, ignoring all of drug product, just focusing on drug substance, because that's the important bit. So we work in both early and late phase development. Most of our work is in early phase development, so supporting that from tox maybe to phase 2B, but across the whole of that scale, even into manufacture, we're developing the chemistry that supports the scale up through to manufacture. So what's the purpose of early development? So we're trying to get to the clinic as quickly as possible. We're developing new chemistry to manufacture materials at scale. That's as representative as possible in terms of tox profile that will end up in the patient in the end. But we're trying to get that time down as quickly as possible and get into patients as soon as possible. And so the ability to share information between people who are developing the chemistry and then people who are going to manufacture that chemistry, even at moderate scale, is really important. And increasingly, data and prediction, as Nick just talked about, are playing an ever more important role in this knowledge handover. So in terms of tech transfer, with the help of ChatGPT, which I'm sure I've modified. I didn't agree with its answer, but it was pretty close. The definition of tech transfer I've put here is movement of process information, knowledge and expertise from one organization to another. In this instance, I'm talking about moving from an R&D environment into a manufacturing environment, but it could be between two sites, it could be between two companies, it could be between two continents, wherever you're moving that information. These processes are complex. You've got to communicate a lot of nuanced and detailed information. So significant planning and documentation goes into these exercises. That knowledge and information exchange is critical. There might, as Nick's already described, there might be some demonstration batches and trials. And particularly before COVID, I think it was relatively common for chemists themselves to move between, the lab, to go and site themselves with a manufacturing team, because they'd be on hand to communicate, any or answer any questions and feel what's going on in the process. That's less common now, particularly post-COVID, but also because of the number of digital tools that we have to aid that communication. But tech transfer is a source of error, delay, and cost. So what can digital tools do to mitigate this? So here's a traditional scale-up. You'll start probably before the image on the left-hand side, even with 96 well plates or something for screening reactions, move up into a few hundred milliliters. You might have a way of scaling between that lab scale to a large lab scale for speed. So there's a giant round bottom flask shown here. But more typically, we're moving into process-relevant vessels, such as that one in the middle, from, say, 250 mils up to 50 litres or something, or 100 litres even could be in glass like that, through to manufacturing vessels shown on the right-hand side. So when you move between these different regimes, there are the same challenges, again, as Nick described, set me up very well. In the same way, instead of thinking about the gas phase and nebulizing solutions, now we're thinking about liquid phase, typically stirring, fluid dynamics, that sort of thing, as you move between these different zones. And indeed, as a chemist, so I'm not a chemical engineer, but working in process chemistry for a while, you develop an appreciation for the dark side and the importance of chemical engineering. So it's not just about sticking atoms together when you're trying to manufacture or you're trying to build a process which is suitable for manufacture. You need to think about the environment around those atoms and how you can affect the manufacture. So when you change your stirring regime, when you change your vessel geometry, when you change your design of impeller, when you change volumes, when you change the heating and cooling types, all of these variables have an impact on the quality of the material that you're going to make. And you can see some images here, thanks to Radley's, some fluid dynamic images of the type of stirring patterns that happen with different impellers. But all of those changes affect that mixing, affect that reaction, and that has an impact on safety, on production rate, and on ultimately on product quality. So again, just like Nick, we should have maybe discussed our presentations beforehand. There are some tools that we can use. I won't go into so much detail, but there are readily available tools which help transfer between scales, which let us predict the impact of the variables that I described before on the chemistry itself. So mapping your vessels allows you to move between different vessels and understand and predict the impact of moving between those different vessels. In fact, you can purposefully go between different designs or stay in a sort of family of designs to extract more information about the impact of different variables on your process. So we use this at CatSci in kinetic modeling for design of experiments, as Nick described, and in process optimization and robustness testing. So we want to be able to provide processes to our customers that are going to work first time in their scale-up. And if we're able to transfer information, which is not just A plus B goes to C if you mix it in this solvent, if we've got the data that sits behind that around the energy of the impeller, the heating and cooling rates, the materials of the vessels, any other interactions that happen inside that mixing vessel, then we can really de-risk the challenges that they face when moving into scale up. I put here at the bottom as a so again, as not a chemical engineer, the detailed maths that goes behind here, I have no idea. But it's really, I think these kind of tools are dangerous on one hand, because you can give them to people who don't understand what they're doing. But if you have, we have a small engineering consultancy group that we work with. But these tools really do help expand the envelope of what someone in a native domain can do. They can start to provide information to experts, which is relevant to their domain, with a good understanding and with a solid foundation, because it's located inside a tool, it's located inside a robust model that then they can start to use and apply and then transfer information between discipline boundaries. So a powerful approach. We have various families of equipment at CatSci, and most recently we've centered around the Radley's family, and this lets us fully understand the mixing regimes and the vessel dimensions and what happens between scale from 2 mils all the way up to 35 litres, and we were able to predict what's going to happen across that whole range through that modelling. Again, prediction is really important, but you need to augment that with collecting as much data as you possibly can. And in our labs, we're able to collect information such as temperature, stirring speed, volumes, etc., all of that kind of process information, and then combine that with chemical information from a number of different probes, some listed here. In fairness, NMR we don't have online, but these kind of tools are available to collect information from your processes. Then combining that with your models, your chemical engineering models, what's happening at different times along the reaction progress, you can really start to transfer information to a manufacturer where they'll be able to control that based on this level of information. It allows them to monitor reaction progress. If they've got the capability, they can use that information for feedback control, and it produces repeatable and reproducible, consistent scale-up. So, as a summary of that short section, you don't need to. This is an example of what really good process chemistry, process development can do. So, taking a process, improving that, reducing the PMI, process mass intensity by 50%, reducing wastewater by 50%, reducing solvent by 25%. All of these kind of impacts are readily available by doing quality process development. And that, in this case, this reduced the overall CO2 impact of this by 45%, which is fantastic. And in a world where chemical manufacturing is always under pressure in terms of its environmental impact, making these kind of improvements is really valuable. I highlighted this particular example because there are loads of these kind of summaries that we have, because this was a technology transfer that went right first time based on that sort of data that I've been talking about. So being able to go to a manufacturer, they can trust the data, They know that they can slot this into perhaps a narrower window than they might do with other bits of information. It's really useful for them. It also guarantees to the ultimate end customer that they're going to get that material ready for their clinical trials. Okay, switching gears a little bit to talk a bit about what we're doing with computer vision. So computer vision, extraction of meaningful information from digital images, and then taking actions based on that information. It's really data hungry. It's a really growing market, and there are wide applications. And you may have driven here in a car which has this kind of capability built in. You can see here various applications. So one in health and safety there. So helmet and visibility, high visibility vest detection. So on building sites or in manufacturing environments, these sorts of tools are available. In terms of equipment health and monitoring spills, tools available for that. In terms of manufacturing, again, there's some tablet manufacturing here where cameras can routinely now view for defects and take actions based on that. And then you'll have heard, I'm sure, in news and different places around the sorts of work that people are doing around image processing and diagnostics from things like MRI scanning. So what's the application in process R&D? Well, as we scale up, human observation is still a primary source of data in process development, and people still take actions even into those early phases around what things look like in chemistry. And so it's critical, but there are difficulties with that, obviously. You can only observe something if someone's watching it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, as a chemist, I have a family to go to. I quite like going on holiday. Sometimes I like to sleep. So I'm not always in the lab available to write down observations. Comparing notes between chemists, and I'm sure people have experienced this. Someone's orange is another person's, I don't know, burnished bronze or something. And so trying to compare notes on observations can be quite tricky. And particularly, it can be difficult to communicate that. You might have a culture in your own laboratory where you've standardized a description of a particular thing, but as soon as you go to a different laboratory or a different culture or a different country, those descriptions become almost meaningless. And so to try and communicate important process information based on observation becomes quite tricky. So what can we do about those kind of things? Well, we're working with a startup, a Bristol-based startup called Lumi. The company's called Reach Industries, but they have a product called Lumi, which is this little camera here at the bottom. So it's a very small webcam, essentially, which is connected to the cloud and then has some AI in a portal behind. So I'll talk about some use cases for them. So yeah, there's a camera. It's Wi-Fi connected. So as soon as you switch that on, it's connected to our Wi-Fi in the lab, and it starts recording. That data is automatically uploaded to the cloud, where it's catalogued. You know where it's from, you know where it is, and that data is stored automatically. Then there's an interface with an app, and that can be on your phone or in a browser, which you can then start to manipulate that data. You can set it up to notify, or you can set it up to carry out different processes. You then take that visual data, you can use it as camera data, and that's really, really valuable. Or you can start to extract data from those images and then do things with that data, such as plot that information. You can start to get process information, chemical process information, kinetic information out of those visual images. It's a relatively cheap way of accessing kinetic information. Obviously, you need to have some sort of visible change for this to work, but cameras are cheap, data storage is cheap, computer vision algorithms are routinely used in a large number of industries, and so this is a really accessible way of starting to address some of those challenges. So the aim is to free up the hands and minds of scientists, so we want to have all of our experiments monitored 24/7, and we want to have the AI systems doing the work in the background, telling us when something's changed, telling us when to do something, notifying chemists that something unexpected has happened or there's been a step change in a reaction. We want to flag all of those things so we can go back and look very quickly. All of that time information then is extracted, and you have a log of what happened in your experiment, a visual log of what happened in your experiment across the entirety of the experimental run. So what kind of things can you investigate? So obviously color, but you can investigate volume, things like turbidity. You can do particle counting, text detection. We're inventing new ways to exploit this technology all the time, but these are some examples that I'll show today. And then you can use that for reaction progress tracking, kinetic interpretation, and then really powerfully to start to communicate those things with clients. Okay, we've got some, they're working, it's good. So this is an example of a reaction, and you'll watch for a long time, and it will change from one shade of yellow to another shade of yellow, back to a different shade of yellow. And so at one level, there's nothing interesting in terms of what's happening in terms of the colors here. But with the computer vision, you can start to extract the changes in shade, and you can start to plot that information. You can also start to communicate with clients exactly what happened. So at this time, it was this color, these kind of visible properties, and then proceed through the lifetime of the reaction until, in this case, there's a precipitation, and you can start to describe what that looks like as well. So instead of writing a tech transfer document which says yellow reaction precipitated after 16 hours, you can start to say this shade of color in a hex key or something, so this shade of color over this amount of time proceeded to precipitate, and then show the images that go along with that, so that if something different happens in the scale-up, they're able to identify that quickly. They can take appropriate action to mitigate that. I was looking at the system last night as you're madly trying to finish bits of presentation, and I was looking at a reaction which was running, which we have got a link here, but I haven't got my computer. But as I was watching, the stirrer stuck, and so this was a suspension with a red solution and a white solid. But as I happened to be watching, obviously something has fallen off at the top, or with the stirrer, or stopped gripping. But then that would send a notification to the chemist. Unfortunately, it was at 10 o'clock at night, so they're unlikely to pop back into the lab to sort something out. But that's now logs exactly what happened during that reaction. In years gone by, we would have come in the next day and would have noticed the same thing. But when did it happen? What was the impact on the quality of that batch? We can now document that, and this is a useful data point, so that if something does happen it's now a hold point. If the quality of the system of the chemistry is okay, then we can use that as a data point to share with manufacturing colleagues that if something falls out of suspension at this time, that's okay. We've got that data point along with the times that go with that. Another example here around phase splitting. So this is just a manual example, but the same principles apply in terms of manufacturing. So instead of being able to see now that there was a biphasic mixture produced on addition of solvent X, we're now able to say with the volume detection and the phase splitting information, at what volume of material was there a phase split? What did that phase split look like? What was the color of the different phase splits? How did that change over time? All of that is automatically logged and then can be shared back with manufacturers. So this is an example case study. So in this example here, it was quite a tricky reaction. So the material starts off on the left-hand side as an initial slurry, goes to the right, turns into a gum, and then that material, in this instance, self-seeded. There's now a process to seed that more in a more controlled way, and then which turns into a final precipitate. This process takes about 15 hours, and so the chemist is not always there to see these events. And so particularly for these nucleation actions, which are spontaneous and happen when they happen, you can monitor that, and this will be flagged by the system so that the user can come back in the next day, see when that happened, what happened, start to draw some conclusions, build a new hypothesis, and then redesign the system to control that process. So great work by M in this example. And this was tech transferred using this kind of data to a customer. Okay, so reactions go through all sorts of changes. This is a diverse example. So you have different colored liquids, there are different phase splits, there are different precipitations, there are different emulsions. All of this data can be captured and then logged through the whole duration of this experiment. This is about a 20-hour experiment, something like that. And you can start to extract the data, and here there's 11 different dimensions which describe the progress of that reaction. So there are 6 different color domains, and then there are 4 different volume parameters, and in this example, a turbidity monitor. So you can take, looking at as a whole, so this is just the summary of all the data. You wouldn't take it in that domain because each domain is separate. Each time domain is separate because you're carrying out a different process. But what you can do then is start to describe the reaction in a a much more quantitative way than you could before. So instead of a biphasic mixture with a red layer and a clear layer, we now have the volumes, we have the colors, we have the turbidity of those different layers, all described, and then comparison between batches can be carried out to show the changes. We have one other tool which kind of bridges the gap between those static cameras and showing what a chemist is doing with their own hands. So this is particularly useful when you're doing manual manipulations. So this is a product from apprentice.io, I think a East Coast US-based startup. And this has been really useful for training, for example, and also for communicating challenges, either examples of challenges to customers when they want to know more detail. You can have one of these cameras at your scale-up site, your manufacturing site, and they can be watching, and you can have a chemist back at your own headquarters and can be offering advice. Or you can start to just log information directly. And one good example we have is around filter cake manipulation, which was particularly tricky. And then what to do for them in the manufacturing group was useful. How much time have I got? We're okay? Good. Okay, so a few quick examples of work that's in progress. So I'll whiz through these as they're not necessarily to do with tech transfer, but they're things that we're doing. So reaction kinetics. So color is an indication of chemical behavior, and so we can start to derive at least relative chemical kinetic plots from these sorts of color changes. With a multidimensional data set, like we've got those 11 different dimensions, what other information can we start to pull out from this visual information that will allow us to draw some chemical conclusions? It's relatively easy to correlate this data to isolated LC data points or other spectroscopy data points, and so you end up with a quantitative then description of what's happened in the reaction, linking those two things together. If you give tools to chemists, or I'm sure all scientists or engineers in general, they'll find interesting uses. So some things that people have started doing in the lab is sort of digitizing things which they wanted to digitize that either we didn't want to fund the vendor to pay for their digital interface, or that perhaps that doesn't exist, it's an old instrument, or in the case of those dials, just a pressure gauge. If people wanted to watch, if they suspected some issue with pressure fluctuation, they can monitor that. So in this modeling mode, you can turn that image into a plot, and so you've got a measure then, it's an XY plot of pressure against time, and then you can discard the video, so you don't need to store that in the cloud. So really useful tools. Another colleague set up a system in collaboration with Lumi, which is monitoring this filtration. So this is a common rate of filtration experiment, so a filterability measurement. So how fast does a material filter? And so what the Lumi camera is doing is essentially measuring the meniscus in this flask and then reporting the values back. So instead of having two people, one with a stopwatch who's writing furiously down, and this is things that we were doing before, you've got a camera, the data is there, there's no chance of misreading or falsifying any data, the data's there, and it's automatically produced for you. That plot of time is produced, and that's what we want. And once you've got that data, you can start to do automatic other manipulations with that data. You can start to produce process relevant information from these experiments just by pointing the camera at it. And then final example. So this is particle counting, and if you watch this scientist, I think they feel like they've already digitized the problem, because they have a counter every time they press the dot that they're counting those cells. That counts, and that was a distinct improvement over, I'm sure, times gone by. But it's still an extremely laborious process. You can see the number of Petri dishes they've got to work through on the left-hand side. Nobody wants to do that job. It takes a long time. It's prone to error. Let's just do particle counting. And it's using algorithms which have been around for, I assume, decades in microscopy, for example, but available in video and available routinely. So all exciting stuff. So coming back to that question, what happens if we could collect this kind of data and seamlessly push that into the manufacturing facility? Well, hopefully I've shown some examples of either predictive modeling or computer vision and the data that you can get from that. We can take that process modeling data, got that video capture, both static and first person. We've got the computer vision reaction mapping, notification and event flagging. We're currently building an API direct into our ELN, which is relatively, so far, simple to connect those things together. And so once you have those different tools connected into one place, you really drive take up and use, and then you've got a central place to store that data. We're working on other things, so integrating other data sources. If you could link your temperature probe or your pH probe to the Lumi source, you'd have the same time points for everything, or an alternative way of meshing those data sets together. Clearly, there's application in initiation of robotic actions. So the tool shows that it can flag things. So once you've got those points where you can flag, then you can ask a robot to do another action, start filtration, add reagent X. Another ambition is to try and turn this into process descriptions directly. So from a video, you should be able to start to describe the manipulation that was carried out, instead of having to go back and rewrite those up. And that works in a similar way to some of the voice control technologies you might have seen. But bringing that voice control and video control together could be very powerful. So all exciting times, I'm sure you'll agree. Final slide. So what do the next steps look like? There's clearly advancements in these areas all the time. So increased predictivity, the algorithms change. I think as people start to capture the sort of idea that these things are possible, we start to label our data properly, and then that in turn accelerates the take-up of different AI tools. Increased interactivity. We've still got to get people to interact with this. If we can connect our customers with a really easy-to-use interface into this tool, they can start to mine and look at data for themselves and answer questions that they might have that come up in the moment, being like the chemist who sat with them, that they can ask directly. And then if we can start to integrate these kind of tools with other technologies, such as robotics, and centralizing with other tools, we can start to leverage the capabilities that the computer vision has alongside existing capabilities. And that is me. So thank you to these collaborators. Thanks to everyone at CatSci, team at Radley's, and the Lumi team.
Thank you very much. And I remember the days in the distant past when you had researchers and manufacturing on the same site.
Yes, those days.
Very, very rare thing today. So perhaps it's good we have videos that we can watch in 10 years from now to see what exactly happened. Any questions?
Hi, thank you for the talk, and it's very interesting to see the Lumi. I have a question. So I've seen similar products from Amazon Recognition, the video analyze. How do you compare your kind of image video analyze in the process versus Amazon Recognition, as well as 3D Demia, the virtual twins, as well as a benchling process design? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. We've done no comparison. I'd imagine, so I'm speaking without any data, so take what I say with a pinch of salt, but my experience of taking products which are developed outside of the laboratory and trying to apply them directly has challenges. They can do things, but they need a lot of development because they're just not built with the same data sets. I think with benchling, you might have a competitor, and I've not looked at this product.
Yeah, hi. I mean, things are moving so quickly in terms of analysis and algorithms. How do you think the regulators are responding to this? Because when you're using data like that to almost potentially guarantee your product characteristics, is there good dialogue there from you guys, or?
So we currently operate in a pre-GMP world. So we are about communicating data that's relevant to the manufacturer so that they can then they wouldn't include this in a filing. But I think that the conversation needs to be had, clearly, because these technologies, they're on the road at the moment, for example. So they're in life-threatening situation, these kind of computer vision algorithms. So if they have traction there, surely we should be able to use them to initiate a injection of a solvent or something in a manufacturing process. I don't know the situation with the regulators.
I have another question. I mean, you have a lot of information electronically, which is great. And one of the things I see a lot is once you have a tech transfer report in paper, it's read once, never again, and ends up in a drawer. Yep. So how will you assure that this information that's now electronically doesn't just get filed in electronic archive and never to be seen again?
Yeah, well, I think it's about demonstrating value. So people use stuff that they like and that they see has use. So if it doesn't, then we're wasting our time. I think it's about accessibility, and it's about having a way to interact with the data that's really easy for someone who's not familiar with that. So we're discussing customer portals and things like that, which will be able to extract the relevant bit of information and just present what's useful. So a bit like the data slice discussion we were having earlier, and present what's relevant, and then any further questions can come back to an expert and they can process that for you.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Sam. Enjoyed that. I'm really curious about the Lumi system. What programming has to be done before you sit it in front of a vessel, for example, or do you just turn it on and it takes the data and you analyze whatever it turns out, or is there, I suppose, do you have to run a control for it to learn from to start with?
So all of the tools that we've shown are built on data. So they are the product of machine learning. So each time you want to build another application, you need to use, it could be the same data set, but you need to train that model to look for a particular variable, that extraction of some data, and then you can build a process relevant information line from that visual cue.
Right, understood. So if you, for example, were waiting to see a cell culture go from lag to log, you just couldn't turn it on and point it. It would have to have been told what to look for.
Yeah, you need to train that. Once it can extrapolate, so once you've got a core set of data, you can then start to extrapolate. And it's the same discussion this is the kind of discussion that would happen with regulators around what needs to be inside the model versus extrapolated outside the model, but they're quite powerful, these tools.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
So it's better than just a camera, that's good. Okay, any more questions? Yes, one more.
Very interesting, especially with the Lumi imaging technique. So with regards to the turbidity measurement you showed, as well as the colors, so how confident you are in terms of, that turbidity is actual turbidity and that color is the actual shade of color? Because you have light, you have other factors, and turbidity measurements, they're suitable, useful, for example, for the stuff we do when it comes to solubilities. I want to learn about that more if possible.
Yeah, so there's two. You can run in a relative mode, so you can watch change, and that's easy. The other thing you can do is calibrate the camera. So as long as you have something in the shot which is the same color, you can map to that color. So we have, I didn't show it, but we have a card which has got, I think, 12 different colors. You put it in shot. So whatever happens with the light changes, it knows what those colors are, and then it recalibrates the image to match those colors. With turbidity, what it's doing is looking for something behind the image, behind the process vessel, and it's looking at fuzziness, essentially. So it's not a turbidity measurement as we would have in a process. It's a proxy for that. But then they've done, so the machine learning game is to take that data, compare it with true turbidity data to come to some sort of alignment.